Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of The Push with Nick and KP. We are back once again to continue our WrestleMania series, this time working on WrestleMania 33. Per usual, we'll go through every single match, give you our thoughts and ratings on each one, and then, of course, go through the card as a whole, give you our thoughts and rating on that as well. So, without further ado, WrestleMania 33 took place in Orlando, Florida at the Camping World Stadium. Of course, Vince didn't allow his announcers to call it by that name because he requested to be called by their old name, which was the Citrus Bowl. This decision has me agreeing with Vince McMahon. So, congratulations, Universe, you win. The announced attendance for this event was 75,245. You can look up the actual attendance and you can find quite a wide variety of attendance numbers, but again, nothing new for WWE. And the tagline for this year's WrestleMania was the ultimate thrill ride. And honestly, I think that's pretty aptly named. Let's go ahead and get into the reasons why. With the opening contest of WrestleMania 33, Shane McMahon going up against AJ Styles. This one's a bit bittersweet now, isn't it, KP? What do you think of this as an opening contest? And of course, comparatively speaking to the others, we always critique these quite a bit. And just overall as a match itself, how'd you like this one?
Looking at the match on paper, taking at face value, Shane McMahon and AJ Styles, I'm thinking to myself, well, okay, was this really any good? I don't really remember it too much, to be honest. Had a bit of a watch back of it, obviously, in line with this project. And honestly, really enjoyed it, to be fair. It was a pretty decent opening contest. Started off, quite back and forth, get of a mix of a sort of like a fight and a wrestling match, sort of blended into one. Sort of had like a different couple of styles in there, pardon the pun. And yeah, I felt like Shane McMahon and AJ Styles just sort of like bounced off of each other quite well. You saw like Shane sort of meeting Styles' offense with a series of sort of like technical sort of displays here and there. Both men sort of like get into a bit of a striking fight, as I mentioned, and I think that's sort of more into Shane's wheelhouse. So AJ was sort of matching that. Um, so yeah, they sort of like gelled quite well in those opening stages, and it's like the midway through. What I will say is when the referee gets knocked down accidentally by AJ Styles, sort of like a big swift kick to the head of the referee. The match does turn into, in my opinion, somewhat of a bit of a spot fest, and the pace does really slow down. But it was fun though. Like the spots were quite fun. It's just you felt like it was going from like one to the other, like A to B to C, in sort of like a way of not like smoothly, but sort of like you know that this is going to be coming next, and now we prep for this bit. So it just felt like a little bit, I don't know, stop start, spot festy style to me, but they were fun as well. I will put that in. We saw a coast to coast attempt from both AJ Styles and Shane McMahon. AJ missing his, but Shane McMahon hitting his attempt, and then we see a effort from Shane McMahon to try and crash onto AJ Styles through the announce table on the outside. He goes for a diving elbow drop from the top rope. Styles manages to evade it, gets up off the table. Quite similar to what we saw from Undertaker at the previous WrestleMania, but obviously that was in the Hell in a Cell matchup. Undertaker was laid out on the table, he got up. Shane was diving down from the top of the cell. So this is quite, I don't know, a bit similar to that one. I got like similar vibes to that from this particular spot. But in terms of how the matchup shaped to go into the end stages, like I said, he looked for that diving elbow drop, Shane McMahon, and AJ moves out of the way. Back in the ring moments later, we do see Shane sort of like countering AJ Styles' moves into a really nice DDT. He lays out AJ. As Shane then looks to go for a shooting star press, he actually misses the effort. Quite a crazy just shooting star press out of absolutely nowhere, to be fair. But yeah, he does miss that. AJ rolls out the way and avoids it. Styles gets back up to his feet, goes onto the apron, and hits a phenomenal forearm to get the victory in this matchup and the opening contest. But like I said, it was pretty good. Like I found it quite fun and quite entertaining. I didn't think either of them had a bad match here whatsoever. I thought it was quite compelling, to be honest. So yeah, it just worked really nicely, to be fair. So yeah, maybe a bit surprising, but it was good. It was fun. I gave it an 8 out of 10. Like for an opening contest for AJ Styles at WrestleMania against Shane McMahon, yeah, I guess maybe a bit surprising when you just take it off of face value how good this match actually was. So yeah, I liked it. I thought it was good. Nick, what did you make of this one? Shane and AJ doesn't sound like the stereotypical, great match at WrestleMania, but this one actually was pretty good in my opinion. What did you make of it though?
Oh, this one's a bit of a mixed bag for me, and I'll kind of explain why. First of all, the commentary team were really selling Shane here, like immensely so. That, over Styles, and that's kind of where the issue starts with me. I don't think I'm in the minority here because the crowd is like the crowd is booing Shane at every turn here, and honestly, deservingly so. Even though AJ is the actual heel, Shane is an athlete. There's no arguing that, of course. But this is the phenomenal one. This is AJ Styles, right? So I just feel like with Shane in the match, this went too long. That's where the biggest issue lies with me. I said the same thing last year with Shane and the Dead Man, obviously. So that's clearly the same issue here. Obviously, more multiplied because AJ is not in the latter parts of his career and is, very much more agile than the Dead Man. So all that being said, they had the crowd eating out of the palms of their hands during this contest. Shane with the shooting star press, impressive, obviously, but does pale a bit in comparison to the things he's done, considering his track record, I guess. But this is awesome chance from the crowd. So like I said, they clearly liked it. AJ finally put Shane away, which thank goodness, because imagine if he had lost that one as well after losing to Jericho the year before. That would have been quite the question mark, I think. But yeah, it was a good match. I think just a bit too long was the biggest issue. And I think Shane kind of puts up too big of a fight again. Shane is an athlete, don't get me wrong, but shouldn't be, able to hang with the best of the WWE, in my opinion. So I gave this one a 7.5 out of 10, which probably seems high compared to all the stuff I've just ranted about. But I just think I'm nitpicking here. But in terms of an opening contest, I think it does work. I think there are matches on this card that could have better suited that, but it was a good quality contest to start off with. AJ, the right guy, getting the win here. Getting into the next contest, we have Kevin Owens going up against Chris Jericho for the United States Championship. A couple of Canadian boys going at it. KP, thoughts on this contest here?
Yeah, two individuals that I hold very highly, in wrestling and just what they do in their careers. I think they're both brilliant. This matchup, I think, was pretty damn solid, to be fair. Both men just knew each other really, really well. Obviously, you go back through the build going into this contest, you have obviously the iconic Festival of Friendship and the list of Jericho, everything that transpired sort of like in the build up to that festival. And then going from there on, Kevin Owens being cost the Universal Championship, by Jericho. There's so many different sort of like layers and elements that went into this matchup, and because these two sort of like had such a like a close knit thing for so long prior to this, they played that really nicely into the match because there were so many reversals throughout this contest. Like literally, like Kevin Owens would try something, Jericho would just reverse it, vice versa, back and forth, like all that sort of stuff. And it worked really nicely. The match was well put together, and I feel like it got better the longer it went on. I don't know about you, Nick, but like in the early stages, it had like a decent feel to it. But then when it got to that sort of like I don't know later, like 80% of the matchup, it really started to like tick along a lot more, and it just got a lot more of a compelling contest for me personally speaking. I was already enjoying it at that point, but I was loving it by the past like the final like few minutes, five or so minutes, I would say. But yeah, some close moments here and there made for quite a fun finish in my mind. And speaking of a fun finish, basically, Kevin Owens looks for a second pop-up powerbomb, but Jericho reverses that into a code breaker. Owens gets one finger on the bottom rope to kick out at two. The camera's like really on this finger for quite some time. Like it's just like a still image, basically. And Owens then rolls to ringside to basically get out of it. And with Jericho starting to follow him, Kevin hits a power bomb onto Jericho onto the apron before then rolling him back into the ring to get the victory. Doesn't sound like it was anything too fun to finish, but back then Kevin Owens using the pop-up power bomb, the power bomb onto the apron was only really in like really heated moments, and I thought that was great, like a great way to end this one. To be fair, Kevin Owens wins the United States Championship as a result, beating Chris Jericho in this contest. And yeah, I just thought like it had a lot of animosity to it between both men. It felt really personal, which obviously that's what it was in the build. So yeah, it seems to just like tick all the boxes for me. Really, it wasn't like a perfect match. It wasn't like it wasn't like an absolute all-time classic or anything, but it was just a solid, good matchup, and I quite enjoyed it. I gave it an 8 out of 10. Maybe I'm showing some bias towards two of my favorites here, but yeah, I really enjoyed this one. I thought it had just such a nice flow to it, and both men just transpired that just very, very well. Nick, what did you rate this one in terms of how these two sort of connected together in the ring, the chemistry, the general flow of the matchup? What do you make of our second match of WrestleMania 33?
Well, if you're showing bias, then I probably will as well, just because our fondness of the two men in the ring. Um, yeah, very fondly remember the storyline. Was fantastic. Obviously, Jericho is great, and as is Kevin Owens. But Jericho's storytelling ability has always been top tier in my opinion. As for the match itself, yeah, kind of what you were saying. The counters and reversals here. I'm not sure I've ever seen a match with so many reversals. If I have, I can't recall it off the top of my head, but it's very sound, very deeply personal, and you mix those things with a very clean match, and you have a recipe for a very good match. In the end, that power bomb on the hardest part of the ring, of course, I like that finish. Yeah, that was something I think probably should have done more often. I get it if that's the point of it, is to be only when desperate measures, if you will. But it was just something different, something you don't see a lot in the business. So yeah, new U.S. champion KO winning that title for the very first time. Um, Again, another bittersweet thing because KO currently isn't wrestling, so maybe that is playing a part into it. But I also give this one an 8 out of 10. I just thought it was a very sound contest, and very good way to follow up opening contest. So with that, getting into the third match of the evening, we have Sasha Banks going up against Charlotte, going up against Nia Jax, going up against Bayley, the current Raw Women's Champion for said championship. So a fatal four-way here. KP, we declared that last year was the official women's evolution, at least on the Mania scene. How does this one follow up in comparison?
Yeah, the women's game, like, you take, even if you take out last year's match and you just have this one, I think it's definitely a step up anyway. But in terms of how I sort of rated this one, this is quite awkward to really discuss because it was a okay to good match. Like, it wasn't a bad contest. But I feel like it wasn't the best performance from the women involved here, and mainly, I guess you could say that sort of all stems down to one particular spot and aspect of this contest, and that comes from Charlotte Flair. So I'll talk about that a little bit as we get to that point here. I'm going to like structure this sort of conversation, and basically, like we see at the start, Nia getting targeted by the rest of the field early on, which is logical, makes sense. The other three ladies are maybe not quite as strong and powerful as Nia Jax, so they got to sort of like team up to take down the stronger of the four, and that sort of like nicely sort of like transpires into the early stages here because we have Nia Jax eliminated first. So we sort of like see Charlotte, Sasha, and Bayley all sort of capitalize on Nia, who's looking for an annihilator that we know now. I'm not sure what she used to call this back then. I was trying to pay attention on commentary to see if they actually mentioned it as an annihilator, but I don't think they called it that. They didn't really sort of gloss over it at all. But yeah, either way, regardless, she looks for a second one of the matchup. And Bayley, Charlotte, Sasha, they're all there. They team up and hit this big powerbomb onto Nia, and then they all sort of like cover Nia like straight away, and that'll be the first elimination of the matchup. So Nia is gone. We're down to just Bayley, Sasha, and Charlotte at this point. I feel like from then on, the rest of the match's key moments relied on a turnbuckle being exposed, and it wasn't. So Charlotte attempts to remove the turnbuckle at one point, and she's sort of like, I don't know if she just seriously just like couldn't get it off or something, but it seemed to be quite like stuck onto it. Maybe they didn't loose it up enough for her to for the start of the matchup. And yeah, when that sort of comes to be, she tries to take it away, but it doesn't quite fall down. Like it just sort of like slips a little bit. Maybe if I'm being like hopeful here, it exposes like a little bit of the top of the turnbuckle, but the pad is still covering the majority of it, like quite a vast majority of it. So anyway, with that being done, we see our second elimination coming up almost immediately afterwards, near enough. So Charlotte eliminates Sasha next. Bayley has been sent to ringside here. She's out of the conversation for the time being. Sasha locks in a bank statement on Charlotte. Charlotte escapes the submission and attempts to slam Sasha, who instead lands on her feet before then attempting a roll up on Flair. Charlotte just shoves Sasha into the somewhat exposed turnbuckle, which is the words that Michael Cole used on commentary, before then eliminating Banks via that roll up. Via a roll up afterwards. So yeah, it's like that's obviously the first instance here that the turnbuckle comes into play. It does come in a little bit more as well in the final elimination of the match and the final pinfall. So with the late stages coming into play here, Bayley sort of is with Charlotte here in the last couple of stages because they're the last two women remaining here. she's sort of like hung up on the top rope. She's got her back towards the ring. She's facing into the crowd. Charlotte then gets thrown onto the mat by a back body drop, a sort of star maneuver from Bayley. She's also on the top ropes and obviously gets launched behind Bayley then. And Bayley sort of like falls into a tree of woe position at the same time. Charlotte gets back up and sort of like charges towards Bayley and supposedly hits the somewhat exposed turnbuckle as a result. Bayley then hits a diving elbow drop to get the victory here in this matchup and to retain the women's or the Raw Women's Championship. So yeah, like literally big moments there relying on this exposed turnbuckle, and it just unfortunately didn't quite work out for them. It was a good match. Like, you take away that, I guess, a little error, and it was quite fun. But yeah, unfortunately, because they put so much weight on that particular thing, and obviously it didn't work out as what they hoped, it sort of reflected quite strongly on the matchup. So yeah, just unfortunate. It wasn't a terrible match, but it did feel a little bit flat, and also actually it felt rushed. Like, it didn't have that much time. Like, considering this is a fatal 4-way elimination matchup, it seemed to go ridiculously quickly. So I don't know the exact time for this one, but it felt like it was over, near enough before it could really get rolling. So out of all of that, I did still give it a 7 out of 10. It's just, yeah, I think there were some glaring issues with this one. They A, needed more time, and B, just they had to get that turnbuckle spot right because yeah, it sort of like affected the rest of the matchup. Nick, what did you make of this one, though? We're still on that turning point for sure, 100%. This is obviously, a much better situation for the women to be in. But I guess in a situation like this, they still needed more time to make it, work and be as effective as it could have been.
Yeah, I won't go into great detail because I feel like you've already done a just job of that. Yeah, it was the strategy to take out Naya, great. That felt like that took like half the match, honestly. But fine, that makes sense. But then yeah, if you're gonna put so much emphasis on that spot, I felt like commentary team did the best they could with making it seem like, the partially covered was fine. I just don't get why you would put so much emphasis on that. One elimination is one thing, but even that was, very anticlimactic with the Sasha elimination. But to do it twice, then, interesting call for sure. Yeah, I do think being rushed was the biggest issue. Obviously, the action we got was fine, but the turnbuckle exposed issue, and then the match being spent on Naya, and then very much okay. I guess that's it. It's kind of how I felt like it. So I think that is a big issue with the card overall. I think there are too many matches, so a lot of them get rushed, and this isn't the first or the last, or this isn't the last women's match to get rushed throughout the evening. So unfortunately, yeah, this one felt a bit of underwhelming considering the 4 women that are in there. Props to Charlotte though for that corkscrew moonsault. That was a thing of beauty. But outside of that, just felt like, yeah, I had high expectations considering the women involved, and it just didn't quite live up to it. I give this one a 6 out of 10. It wasn't terrible, but could have been much better. With that, let's get into the next contest. And I think this contest might have been, considering WWE WrestleMania's track history, I think this could have been a better option for that kickoff match. But regardless, this has Enzo Amore and Big Cass and going up against Cesaro and the Sheamus, going up against the Hardy Boys, who made their return here. Surprise return as announced by the New Day. And then, of course, we have Gallows and Anderson here as well for those Raw Tag Team Championships in a ladder match. Funny enough, the Hardy Boys were in a match with the Young Bucks the day before for Ring of Honor, trying to throw everyone off the scent, and were even spotted in their hotel room at the start of WrestleMania, but were able to sneak out last minute to arrive here. So kayfabe still trying to be kept alive there at this point. But KP, in terms of ladder matches, in terms of on the WrestleMania stage, and the return of the Hardy Boys and the new crowning of the returning Hardy Boys, what did you make of all this?
Yeah, I think it's one of those iconic WrestleMania moments that a lot of people will sort of like treasure and look back on and smile over, sort of thing. I love this sort of way they brought them back in ahead of this contest. I'm not entirely sure if everybody else in the matchup did agree with it that way. I'm pretty sure I don't know if I'm making this up, but I'm pretty sure a number of years ago I heard that apparently there was a team in this one that were a little bit annoyed about the Hardys coming back in the way they did. Apparently it was kept a really, really big hush hush secret sort of thing. Maybe you got a bit more on that in a bit. But yeah, in terms of just generally the moment though, it's great. The pop from the crowd, absolutely brilliant. Everyone's chanting delete before the New Day have even announced anything. So they already sort of like are hopeful and wanting this to happen, and they get exactly what they asked for in Matt and Jeff coming back in. So yeah, we do have the bar. Yeah, they are the bar in this. Well, at this stage, we have obviously Karl and Luke of the OC, and then Enzo and Cass. It's got a few different elements to it, and it's not a bad tag team matchup here. You throw in some ladders, you whack in the Hardy Boys, you're gonna have a good time. So that's pretty much what they did here as well. It was quite fun. Fair bit of carnage throughout. First time a tag team championship has changed hands at WrestleMania in 17 years, which is unbelievable as a stat. Like that's actually crazy. That was what Michael Cole said on commentary, so I'm assuming he's right about that. Some fun spots during the match, such as the bar hitting beats of the Bodhrán and the Cesaro spin for nearly 30 seconds. Lots of ladders being used in various different ways, as weapons and as aids and, all this kind of thing here and there. And obviously, you throw in the Hardy Boys in a ladder match like this, you're going to have Jeff doing something off of a ladder. And that's exactly what he did. Did he nail it 100%? No, not quite, but it was still fun and it was still good to watch. Hits a swanton bomb off of a ladder onto the bar. Mostly Cesaro. Maybe Sheamus, got caught by Jeff's feet or something, perhaps. But yeah, it was still a cool moment for sure. And welcome back to WWE for the Hardy Boys. So yeah, it was great to have them return, and yeah, the crowd was absolutely loud for it, which is awesome to see as well. In terms of how this one came down to be in the end, we do see Jeff Hardy hitting that swanton bomb off of the ladder onto the bar, and then Matt Hardy sort of like there on the ladder itself in the ring, and then he just simply just unhooks the championships and yeah, wins the matchup here on behalf of him and Jeff. So yeah, it was great. Yeah, I love this matchup, to be fair. It's not like the best ladder match you'll ever see, but it was fun. It had a really cool moment to begin with, and it had a feel-good moment at the end when the Hardys, came back and just took over control of the tag team division once more. So, yeah, I enjoyed this one for what it was. I gave it an 8 out of 10. I think this is probably my match of the evening. I gave 3 matches an 8, so yeah, I think this one probably takes the biscuit just about because of the moment beforehand. But yeah, it was fun. I really like this one. Nick, what did you make of this? Triple threat turning into a fatal 4-way. And yeah, we obviously got the Hardys having a really, really big sort of return and moment here. Yeah, how does one play out for you?
Yeah, I thought it was great. Nothing super crazy comparatively speaking outside of that swanton. There were some cool spots here, fun spots, but relatively safe for a ladder match. At least we've seen some crazy ones in the past, so not really talking down on this one, just kind of comparatively speaking. But yeah, I thought it was a good contest. Obviously, all the teams here are pretty over. So I think everyone's just kind of sitting back, enjoying themselves, and rightfully so. The ending with that swanton as Matt stays in the ring and kind of picks up the pieces, I thought was great. For them to come back and win, I think was more about the moment than anything, at least for me. But a quality contest nonetheless. I gave this one an 8 out of 10. Um, yeah, just great. Like I said, everyone's really super over here, and so that definitely helps and just makes the match feel more special. And the crowd was genuinely pretty good throughout the night. This match was definitely one of the ones that were their favorite, and honestly, as you kind of were alluding to, were one of the better ones of the evening. So rightfully so. But yeah, solid contest here, and great to see the Hardy Boys back in WWE. Getting into the next match, we have the Miz and Maryse going up against Nikki Bella and John Cena, or should I say, Mr. and Mrs. Cena. Very similar to the opening match here. I'm not sure the crowd dynamic was quite what WWE wanted, but the Miz taking full advantage here of that crowd eating out of the palm of his hand. He's great at doing that. But KP, thoughts on this contest here? Al Roker, as a special ring announcer, got booed out of the building as well. That was a bit entertaining as well. But what'd you make of this one?
Yeah, I feel like this matchup was purely for the moment afterwards, as well as basically the build sort of carrying this one going into it. It actually does have a compelling dynamic when you think about it. You see John Cena and Nikki Bella, Miz and Maryse, two couples at sort of like different sort of periods of their lives. Miz and Maryse have been married for a while. Cena and Bella have obviously been sort of, not really getting into all that. And yeah, I feel like the build was good going into this one. If I do remember it rightly, watching the video package before, it sort of brought back a lot of memories. And it wasn't bad, but the match of itself was okay. It felt like a weekly show match, so one you would see maybe on like Raw or SmackDown, probably towards like the later stages of the card, perhaps. And yeah, it didn't overly feel WrestleMania worthy, in terms of the match content as itself. It had a very simple sort of dynamic to it, and we saw this quite recently actually with I think it was Paige and AJ Lee a number of WrestleManias ago, actually ironically against the Bellas, so that included Nikki Bella as well. And yeah, basically the main dynamic of the matchup here was just Miz beating down John Cena for quite some time, and the guys were involved for probably a good 85-90% of this matchup. And then eventually a tag is made to Nikki Bella, and then the finish is not too long afterwards. So it did have a very simple vibe to it. But yeah, like you already mentioned, the Miz playing to the crowd, in parts here at the start of the matchup and towards the late stages just seemed to work really nicely. Obviously, he loves that. He enjoys it so much, and he just does it really well. And then, yeah, we do have, sort of like the late stages with Nikki and Maryse's involvement being only, I would say, about 2 minutes at most, perhaps. That might even be generous. It was really short between just the two ladies being involved. But yeah, it was a fine match for what it was, but it just was a really short match, and it felt like, yeah, maybe it was I don't know if it was rushed, because Miz did take his time beating John Cena up, so yeah, I don't know. Take it what you will. It was just quite short, though. It felt like a simple sort of, yeah, TV show match, I would say. In terms of how we got to the finish, though, after almost all the match being Cena and Miz in the ring, like I've already mentioned, Cena eventually tags in Nikki, who takes control against Maryse. With Maryse down, and then Cena taking down Miz in the ring, him and Nikki Bella both hit a 5-knuckle shuffle, and then they follow that by Cena hitting an AA onto the Miz, as well as Nikki Bella hitting a Rack Attack 2.0 onto Maryse. They sort of both go for a cover at the same time as well, and that'll be 1, 2, 3 for Nikki and Cena. Yeah, like I said at the very start of all this, I think the match was basically more about what followed afterwards. There was a lot of like family members in the crowd of Nikki and John, and there's a good reason for that, because once this all is said and done, Cena takes the mic for a couple of, well, for a little bit, and yeah, he basically just ends up proposing to Nikki Bella in the ring, to which she says yes. So obviously there's been a lot of sort of, I think it's like Total Bellas, I think it was, or it might have been Total Divas. I think it was Total Bellas though, because it focused mainly on the family of the Bellas at the time. And Cena was basically saying how he was never really looking to get like married or have kids or anything like that. And yeah, it sort of like seemed like it was just something that wasn't going to be. It was more like dumb hope for Nikki Bella at this point. And obviously, with Cena proposing here at the end of this matchup, obviously it made for quite a quite an interesting moment towards the end there. Unfortunately, it didn't last for the two, but I guess at the time, it was quite a wholesome moment, and it felt kind of cool to watch. So, in terms of this whole thing altogether, I gave it a 6 out of 10. Like I say, I don't really particularly rate the matchup. It was fine. It was okay. It wasn't anything special. It was just okay. But then the match, well, the post bit was quite, I don't know, quite wholesome. So it's quite nice. Until I'd taken it in as if I was watching it live. Obviously, not like looking back on it now, where they both had completely different things going on for them. But that's not a conversation for now. Nick, what did you make of this one? It's quite interesting to talk about. It's yeah, it's a weird feel, but what did you make of this mixed tag match?
Yeah, I think a TV match is a perfect way to describe this. I think you said 85% of the match being the men, that maybe even 90%. I think that's probably accurate, and I think probably done for a good reason. Um, yeah, the double knuckle shuffle and rack attack. I think they rack attack and AA in unison for the ref to count in unison for both of them at the same time. It was pretty cheesy. Um, JBL said during this match, I don't think Cena has ever faced anyone quite like The Miz. Interesting comment there. This is why I check all of their stats when they say them on through the shows. It was a fun little match with the proposal afterwards, like you said, obviously being the highlight of this bit. And that obviously was much better than the actual match. But John Cena, just the second man to win 10 matches at WrestleMania, joining the likes of The Undertaker. And yeah, it's kind of where it ends for me. Rating on this one is a 5 out of 10. I just feel a bit generous given the match we got. But Miz doing great crowd work. But other than that, and the actual moment after the match, didn't really feel like it was Mania worthy, if you will. But with that, getting into the next contest, which has Triple H going up against another former Shield member, this time of Seth Rollins, in an unsanctioned match. KP, thoughts on this match?
So this one might come across controversial for me. I'm not entirely certain if it will or not. We'll have to wait and see. But in terms of this matchup, I think unfortunately it was just quite dull in parts and just really slow for the vast majority of it. Like the stipulation as seen on the screen is unsanctioned, and I thought this one was going to be hell for leather and it's going to be brutal for the entire contest. Um, it I wasn't expecting like an absolute, bloodbath or anything. Don't get me wrong, but I was expecting something a little bit more, I don't know, intense than what we got here in this contest. Considering the personal sort of feelings between the two of them going into this one, all the history, all the build, it was loaded with it. So there was a lot of animosity that went into it, and they did show that in parts of the contest. But I don't feel like they ever really left first gear for this one. Didn't go quite into second gear at all, and it just felt like it was just moving along at like one particular pace for the entire contest. So yeah, it had its bits here and there, but nothing overly special in my opinion, to be honest. Like we had weapons such as like a steel chairs, quite a few of them as well, like spots and things. We had the table that was involved, which neither man actually went through. More about that later on. And we had the sledgehammer, but once again, the sledgehammer, like similar to the Triple H match from the year before, was just essentially used to, I don't know, just to provoke his opponent into getting it off of him, rather than him actually doing any damage with it. So, yeah, I feel like this one didn't really ever get out of that first gear, like I've already mentioned. It was just very slow, and I felt like it quite dragged, honestly. Triple H targeting the previously injured knee of Rollins was smart and made for good storytelling. I will, give it props for that. I think he did a good job with that, and it sort of weakened down Rollins for a very large part of the matchup. Had to get him to fight from underneath. And yeah, the storytelling was good in that sense because that's obviously a very big part of what led into this one from the very, very beginning of the injury that happened. Like I want to say about like 18 months before this, probably something like that. So yeah, it's quite a long time coming here. That did come at an expense of pace and energy in the match, though. So you get that trade off there, I guess you can say. But it did make Rollins look strong to fight through, towards the end and actually get the victory. So I guess there's pros and cons to that decision. And I think maybe you're either going to like it or you're going to think it's a bit dull and dry. So yeah, maybe I can understand people thinking either way, but I personally didn't really vibe with this one. We see towards the end of the contest, Triple H looks for a second pedigree, and Seth manages to avoid it. After a series of moves, Seth escapes from Triple H's clutches, and Triple H almost actually hits Stephanie McMahon on the apron, who's sort of like, trying to like distract Seth Rollins at the time, allowing Triple H with a clear opportunity to strike. But obviously, yeah, Triple H almost hits Seth, stops himself from doing so. And then when he turns around, sort of thing, he gets a super kick from Seth Rollins. And then that just, just sort of like stumbles Triple H into Stephanie McMahon, and she goes crashing through the setup table on the outside. Just taking a really like solid fall through the table, clean as hell. Once that sort of like comes to be, though, we see Seth Rollins go for a pedigree onto Triple H, and that would be the victory for Seth in the end. So yeah, it was it had decent moments. Like we saw a pedigree from Triple H with Seth kicked out of, and obviously with all the the damage to the knee, it did make Seth look pretty good. But I don't know. I don't think going through what happened in between was worth getting to all that. In my opinion, it just felt so dull and dry. But it had decent elements to it, and it felt really long. They had a lot of time for this contest. They tried to fit in, a lot of punishment, like in the sense of like, weakening down Rollins and like Seth sort of like fighting back from that underneath sort of demeanor. I gave this one a 7 out of 10. I think it could have been a lot better, personally speaking. It wasn't an all-time classic, in my opinion. But it wasn't terrible either. It wasn't a bad match. It's just, in my opinion, I think it just was a little too long. It dragged a bit, and it could have been a bit more intense and actually sort of like, be a bit more worthy of the unsanctioned matchup sort of thing. Because that sort of deems to me like, if it's unsanctioned, nothing is going to be held back here. And I feel like they didn't really go to those depths. Not that I've seen in the past. I've seen much better unsanctioned match than this before. Nick, what did you make of this one? I've sort of like dogged on it for a while here, but gave it a decent rating still. Make of that what you will. What did you make of this contest?
So to your point, this was definitely a slow burn match at just under 26 minutes. You are going to have some lull points, if you will. But for me, I only felt like generally like I was checking the clock maybe once in the middle there. So generally speaking, for 26 minutes to keep my attention over the grand scheme of things, I think that's pretty good. But this one kind of wasted no time, felt very personal. The right knee being the primary focus. Triple H, the cerebral assassin for a reason, knows exactly how to work that. I'd argue one of his greatest strengths as a wrestler is telling a story of focusing on having a focal point during a match, of a weak spot or making one. And at this point, it was kind of both. Stephanie coming into play here, I thought that was, as we would expect, that beautiful Phoenix splash from Seth. But yeah, like I said, very slow burn, but great storytelling, I thought. Yes, it was an unsanctioned match. Yes, there were some weapons involved, but I think it was more so like maybe the weapons were an option, but the story was so long and personal coming up to this that they just didn't really use them because they all they cared about was inflicting pain on one another. So I kind of took I think kind of the different angle on how I perceived the match. So, not saying either of us are wrong. It's just how I perceived it. So, but yeah, I thought the storytelling was great. Stephanie through the table, as you said, very clean. And for those of us that had been watching her be a thorn in everyone's side for quite some time, it was kind of a relief to see her go through that table. But yeah, the Kingslayer here, Rollins getting the win. Yeah, I thought this was just a great contest and a great way to put another former member of the Shield over. This loss for Triple H put him at the highest amount of losses at WrestleMania. So say what you want about him not putting people over, and I think there certainly are instances of that. But for every instance you have of that, you have an instance of him putting someone over, like he did here. So I'll say it before and I'll say it again. Triple H does not deserve the rap he does, at least in ring. Yeah, I give this one an 8.5 out of 10. It was actually my match of the night. I really like this one. Just a notch above a couple other matches that had a similar rating. So yeah, I think probably the biggest variance of Mania so far for us, anyways. But yeah, I generally enjoyed the story. Getting into the next contest, we have probably one we will agree on a little bit more. Very controversial, some talking points here. Randy Orton going up against Bray Wyatt for the WWE Championship. This was the first time two third generation wrestlers battled for a world title at WrestleMania. And I believe also the same can be said for the first time insects were shown in the ring or on the ring. AP, thoughts on this interesting matchup?
Well, I don't think it'll be a surprise to anybody who's seen this matchup, but I think my main description of this matchup is weird. And I use some synonyms here throughout this explanation, so I can sort of like keep things a little bit fresh. So let's get started. Yeah, like I said, weird match. Didn't really feel like a WWE title worthy contest from just the match itself. It just was so incredibly strange. We had these cinematic effects coming onto the ring, sort of like covering the mat. That happened on 3 occasions. I'm not entirely certain as to what the benefit of this was. It was obviously looking to spook out, Randy Orton, I guess. But if anything, really, it kind of caught Randy on the first one because he sort of rolled to ringside. But then it was mainly just spooking out the referee, really, for the whole thing. He was pegging it out, legging it, getting straight out of there, and it seemed to work on the officials. That's something. But yeah, I don't know. In terms of just what they did there, it was an odd choice. I know Bray is quite, he's got a very creative mind. He's one of the most unique minds in the wrestling business, and was whilst he was sort of in the product. But I feel like he had some good ideas and maybe some ideas that perhaps weren't so good. And I feel like this sort of like fits into the latter. I don't think it was an overly great idea to be having the cinematic, but it might not even been an idea. But it might not even been have been his idea. But it sounds like something that he would have suggested. I'm not going to say if it definitely was or wasn't, but maybe it was, and maybe it wasn't such a good one in that sense. Yeah, it felt more awkward than anything else. Those those cinematic things in the ring. The camera panning up so we could have a clear as day view of it, looking over it, and it just sort of like gave a little bit of respite from the matchup itself whilst they were happening. The commentary team almost sounded uninterested at times, but I think it was more just them selling the strange vibe of the matchup, so I'll give them a pass on that. But it did sound like they were literally just like, not speaking for quite a long time. The tone of which they were speaking was quite, mellow. But yeah, I'm going to go with the fact they were selling the weirdness. So that's absolutely okay. The match never really turned up a notch and sort of stayed as a flat, steady back and forth. Besides all the weirdness that was involved and all the oddness and this, that, and the other. So yeah, it's it's different, that's for sure. In terms of how we got to our finish, though, we see Bray Wyatt hitting their sister Abigail onto Randy Orton, only to get a 2 count. Bray sort of like stalks Randy, does that weird demonic sort of like walking pose that you can see on the bottom left there, and whilst he's waiting for Randy to get back up to his feet, he sort of like goes over towards Randy as he's sort of getting up. Bray sort of like throws a few punches, sporadically, and Randy just eventually just gets up, hits an RKO out of absolutely nowhere, and that's enough to win the matchup and to become the new WWE champion. So yeah, it's a strange little thing, but it is what it is. I give this one a 6.5 out of 10. Didn't really like it too much, but yeah, what did you make of this one, Nick, in terms of this match? Did Bray and Randy kill it, or was it a bit of an odd one for you?
Yeah, as with most things involving Bray Wyatt, this match was very unique, and that's the word I'm going to use throughout this. The commentary team, I thought, did a good job of selling it, so I think kind of what you maybe had thought they were doing, I just trying to just shocked at what they were seeing. I think that's kind of the vibe I got from it. Saying things like how out of place Randy looks throughout the match. The images on the mat was a very unique moment as well. We'll say that. And then quite literally the RKO out of nowhere to crown Randy the new WWE champion for the 13th time. I felt the finish was a bit anticlimactic. I felt like they were brewing something a little more special. I felt like they probably should have gotten some more time. And so a lot of the matches we see throughout the night, some need more time, some need less. I think this is one of those obviously that should have had a little more. Because the focal point of the match just appeared to be the insect shown on the ring, and so that's like, what were you gonna do ever? I think what they could have done, just an option, they could have had actual insects maybe at one towards the end of the match actually be on there somehow. Whether they throw all that on there, when the uh, uh, arena goes dark or something, they could have done something more with that. And maybe they just didn't have the time. I'm not sure, but regardless, yeah, I felt this was pretty underwhelming, especially considering it was a title match. I give this one a 5 out of 10. Yeah, this one just didn't do it for me. Didn't really have much going for it outside of the unique aspect of it. And I don't think many people really liked that set aspect. So, yeah, 5 out of 10 for me. Unfortunately, felt like it could have done something a lot better considering, the very personal feud leading up to this. But yeah, it definitely didn't quite live up to the hope, I guess. With that, we'll get into the next contest, which has Brock Lesnar with Paul Heyman going up against Goldberg for that Universal Championship. Um, yeah, KP, thoughts on this one? We've seen these two go at it. It's pretty uh, unremarkable matches in the past. So, comparatively speaking, I think this one is a notch above. But how does it fare for you in the grand scheme of things? I think these two had their thing and they stick to it, and that's kind of what I felt like we got here. But yeah, what'd you make of this one?
Yeah, they certainly got that thing all right, that's for sure. That's a great way of describing this because it literally was just you put these two in a ring together, and you literally go as basic as freaking possible, essentially. So this was a quick match. It was a heavyweight encounter. But, it's a clash of two just absolutely monstrous men, and this one was literally filled with an entirety of 4 moves in the whole match. So, we saw spears, we saw German suplexes, a jackhammer, and an F5, and that is all she wrote in terms of, maneuvers. But it was, it was hard hitting, to be fair. It it lived up to that bill, but you'd expect that from these two, right? That's literally what these two are about. That's their bread and butter at the end of the day. So that's not exactly a surprise or a shock. It's an expectancy at this point. So yeah, it was a very physical battle. We see Goldberg spearing Lesnar through the barricade after a really, really hot start from him. Sort of like taking it to Brock Lesnar after he actually started really well in the sort of like extremely early stages, hitting the few German suplexes. But yes, Goldberg hits a spear and then sort of like takes control from there on. The spear through the barricade, Lesnar getting back into the ring then as well afterwards, hit Goldberg hitting a jackhammer and Lesnar kicking out of it. And then we see Lesnar taking over. And towards the end of the contest, he hits up to his 10th German suplex of the matchup before then hitting an F5, and that'll be enough for Lesnar to get the victory here in this match. That's essentially all that happened. They've literally just probably gone through A to Z right there. It's not my type of match. Like, I don't rate either of these two in terms of an in-ring aspect at this point of their careers. I don't care for them whatsoever. And honestly, I'm still fuming over Goldberg taking the title off of Kevin Owens. So, yeah, maybe some personal sort of vendettas from me there still towards this sort of situation. This could have been Jericho and Owens, but alas, it is what it is. I get this one a 3.5 out of 10. It's just not my type of matchup. I don't like this. Like, yeah, it's heavy hitting. I guess it could be classed as fun if you like a very quick, out the gates, just sort of, battle, I suppose. But I don't care for this. This isn't me at all. So yeah, not a fan. 3.5. At least it was quick, I suppose, in from my perspective. Get out of the way. But Nick, what did you make of this one? Have you got something a bit more, grand to deliver here in terms of, like, did you like it a lot more than I did, or yeah, I don't know. I can't take off my tinted glasses here. Can you?
Well, I know that rhetorical question is solely for the listeners here, but yeah, they had to show the Universal Championship. Goldberg getting that from KO. Um, you know, you know this quite well. We've talked about this numerous times, but that was one of the most infuriating moments for me and you as a wrestling fan. No joke. I personally pondered leaving wrestling again. At this point, I had just gotten back. It's been a couple years, 2 or 3 years since I came back from watching after school. But yeah, this if you're looking for Lesnar Goldberg kind of hype, if unless this is your first podcast listening to the push, you know that you're not in the right place. Neither of us are going to do that. But listen, as far as the wrestling match itself, this was not near as bad as their last encounter at WrestleMania 20, which was just a horrendous match. But obviously, it still wasn't a 5-star classic. Far from it. Both men stick to what they know. They do that. They do that, and they do that best. Their best work when they do said work. Brock comes out, the 10 German suplexes. Yeah, this entire run for Goldberg, 14-year hiatus, comes in under 10 minutes, and that's over. That's 4 matches, including a Royal Rumble, over the span of 5 months. So it's just not the talent that I'm going to endorse ever. This will be the last time we see Goldberg until his match with Undertaker and Saudi. No comment there. But yeah, for me, rating wise, it wasn't as bad as their last one, but their last one was terrible as well. So that's take that with a grain of salt. I gave this one a 5 out of 10. It was just it was better. It's what they wanted the first time these guys got together at 20, but still far from a great match. It was very safe and stick to what they know. So we'll call it that and we'll run off with it. Next match of the evening, a 6-pack challenge, which includes the likes of Becky Lynch, Mickie James, Carmella with James Ellsworth, Natalya, Naomi, and Alexa Bliss, who is obviously defending that SmackDown Women's Championship. KB, thoughts on this one?
You mentioned the previous women's matchup of this WrestleMania not having enough time, and you alluded to this one, well, there being another match on the card that felt the same way as that particular one, and that is this contest right here. Unfortunately, yeah, this one was a bit short considering how many superstars are involved here. You got all 6 women, sort of like fighting to try and get like their own little spots in here in this contest, and you can tell the match is at a really high pace because everyone's just constantly going at it here. Yeah, it's rushed. It really, really is. Naomi had a good reception. That's what I will say. That's like my main positive here. She was received really well by the crowd. Obviously, hometown crowd for her, and her winning at the end, did get a really good pop from the crowd as well. So at least it sort of like hit on a couple of cylinders there. In terms of the matchup itself, though, it did need more time. Like, that's the main criticism here. It could have been a lot better because there are some really talented women involved here. I mean, you look at like Alexa Bliss, Becky Lynch, Natalya, Mickie James, Naomi, Carmella as well. Like, you got so many different elements there. You got like people that started there, well, like the earlier stages of their career. You've got people sort of like like a veteran in Mickie James. You've got sort of like the experience levels in Natalya. There's a lot of things here. So it is pretty set up to be a good contest, but yeah, because they didn't have the time to really go through it in their own sort of way, it just was really, really quick and rushed. That's unfortunate because it could have been a lot better. But regardless of the fact, I thought it was okay. It was fine. It was a decent matchup. In terms of how we got to the finish in this one, though, so Naomi gets on a roll. She's sort of like going through the motions here. She hits a dive to the rest of the field, who are all at ringside, before then rolling Alexa Bliss back into the ring. Bliss hits a right hand, sort of attempts to get the victory, but Naomi reverses her offense nicely into a Feel the Glow, and that sort of allows Naomi to take control. Alexa has no choice; she can't get out of it, and she's forced to tap and to submit to Naomi. And yeah, just gets a really nice pop, like I mentioned earlier on. But like I say, there were a lot of elements in, but so when you got a 6-pack challenge, one fall to a finish, this it's not like this was like the previous matchup for the women. It's not an elimination style rule, so you don't have to have 5 different eliminations. But in this one, with that one fall only, to have all sort of, all of the field basically just dumbed down and done in the first, like, I don't know, like 4 or 5 minutes of this matchup is quite crazy. There's a lot of talent here, and they all just sort of like got shuffled over, sort of thing. I gave this one a 6 out of 10. Like I say, it was okay, it was fine, but it just could have been a lot better if they'd given it more time. That's just my personal opinion, and I'm sure you do agree with that, Nick. So, how did you rate this one in terms of the flow of the contest? I'm sure you do agree. But yeah, what's your overall thoughts?
Before getting into the downsides here, I just want to say that it is truly crazy. At WrestleMania 32, we had the breakthrough of the women's division on the Mania stage. And the very next year, we have 10 women in title matches alone, 12 if you count the mixed match from earlier as well. We've come a long way. That being said, for 6 women to have a match in 5 minutes and 35 seconds for the title, it's just disrespectful. It's nothing against the women. It's not their fault. It is the fault of the way they handled this card. Again, we've said this on numerous occasions. There were matches that took too long, and there are matches that didn't have enough time. Obviously, I think this is probably the worst offender of not having enough time. If any competition to that kind of moniker would probably be the Randy Orton Bray Wyatt match. I think needed more time, but this one definitely the most. As you kind of just alluded to, for 5 other women or 4 other women to just all of a sudden not be able to come in and break that up. Again, I feel like I've said this a few times tonight. Very anticlimactic finish. So, yeah, it was a fun moment for the hometown girl Naomi to win the new SmackDown Women's Championship. But yeah, first time in 11 years since a women's title has changed hands. WrestleMania 22. Yeah, this match should have been at least double the length, probably triple the length to give this some time to go. But unfortunately, they did not get that. So again, no issues with what they did. They were just doing the best with what they had, but unfortunately, they had very little to work with. Rating for me on this one is 5 out of 10. Yeah, women felt like they kind of got gypped this year, to be honest. But anyways, moving on to the next contest, which is the main event that has Roman Reigns going up against a 52-year-old oldest WrestleMania main eventer, and that of the Undertaker, whose record currently is 23-1. KP, thoughts on this main event, comparatively speaking, and how'd you feel about this one wrapping up the show here, WrestleMania 33?
Ooh, okay. This I use a lot of these words for Triple H and Seth Rollins, but I kind of feel bad for Triple H and Seth, the fact that I'm going to be using some of that same lingo here. In this main event, I just found it utterly dull, boring, slow, dry. Yeah, they're synonyms I used earlier on, I get that, but this one took those and sort of multiplied them and made them feel a lot more, sleep-worthy. This was a struggle to get through. It really, really was. We start off the contest with, a bit of a fight of strikes. Undertaker's obviously always been known as one of the best strikers in the game. And Roman does sort of like reply to that as well, and they have a bit of a fight. But as we get to the midway stages, Roman and Taker do more damage to each other, which is obviously what you'd expect. That's how matches work. But notably, the moment where Roman Reigns spears Undertaker through an announce table, that's when the match really takes a hit. So the pace and intensity completely disappears from this point onwards. We don't get that back. That's gone. It's been left probably in the essence of the announce table at this point. And yeah, we see the match becoming a bit of a mess towards those later stages. It just starts to drag along, and we see a part where Roman actually struggles to pick the Undertaker up, and it just feels like it's a sloppy little mess at that point. The finish was seemingly botched as well too. So the finish in this one is Roman Reigns hits a spear off of bouncing off of the ropes, trying to get momentum here. After having hit probably a good 4 spears prior to this one, none of them putting Undertaker away, and yeah, he bounces off the ropes. But like I say, the finish was I think it was botched because Roman goes for the bounce off the ropes. I think he goes for it a little too early because he sort of bounces off the ropes. It looks like he's setting up for a big spear, and then he just punches Undertaker. So I feel Undertaker wasn't even in the right position either. So maybe whether it was a case of Taker wasn't in the right position or if Roman did it too early. Either way, that looked sloppy as hell, and it didn't look clean regardless. So yeah, we see that obviously situation. Then we do go into the finish immediately afterwards for Roman Reigns to get the victory. But there were so many Superman punches, so many spears. And Roman just dominated Undertaker in those late stages. Like, I get it. You know, this is somebody who's getting towards their prime in Roman Reigns in terms of like a physical sort of capacity. And then you got the Undertaker, who, you know, like you said, oldest WrestleMania main eventer, is at the very late stages of his career, is definitely not in his prime anymore, and is, you know, on a downwards decline in terms of in-ring performances. And that's a shame because obviously the legacy that he has had up until this point. It's only his second loss at WrestleMania, so you know he's still still been in around the wins recently, but this one obviously was his second loss. It just didn't really have a proper main event feel to it. And as the match was going along, the crowd were really quiet for a large part of this one, which doesn't help when you're watching it. You know, you know, you want the crowd to be sort of like loving the hell out of the match, so that you can sort of like be, you know, enjoying it as well. So you can sort of like vibe off of that sort of atmosphere. But it didn't have that one, I'm afraid. Post match, we see the Undertaker taking off his gloves, coat, and hat. He leaves them in the ring. That sort of like ends the show as he sort of like gets taken down the elevator midway up the ramp. And normally in this case, that will signify, you know, maybe the end of him as the Undertaker, you know, maybe the last of him in the ring. But obviously, we both know that is not the case. Yeah. Um, so in this match, I gave it a 6 out of 10, which sounds, I guess, a little generous. Um, no, I'm changing my mind. I'm going to give it a 5.5 out of 10. I can't give it. I preferred the women's match prior to this one. That's not to say the women's match was good, but I don't think this is as good as that one. I really, really don't. This was so unbelievably boring to watch, and yeah, it if it probably wasn't the fact that Roman Reigns gets a massive victory, it's the biggest win of his career up until this point, and you know it's obviously a moment here at WrestleMania. Maybe this one gets even lower, but yeah, 5.5 for me. I I didn't like this one whatsoever. It was a poor main event, so boring, so dull, dragged, and yeah, just terrible. Nick, have at it. Go for it. What did you make of this main event? Roman versus Taker. Yeah, the floor is yours.
Yeah, it's hard for us to be negative as much as we have been, but again, we're not gonna, you know, give you our thoughts on this just to please. We're gonna give you our thoughts on them as we felt they deserve. So, unfortunately, that is just kind of the way this Mania went. Started off decent and definitely took a hard turn, which, you know, the ultimate thrill ride I think isn't appropriate. We had some high points, we've had some low points. This is unfortunately one of the low points. I said it with the Brock match when he broke the streak. I'll say it again here. This should have been the last match. That spear through the table was a pretty brutal spot. But unfortunately, that's kind of the only interesting spot, at least for me. Um, as you said, loads of uh, Superman punches and spears here. Just Undertaker, it happened so fast too. Like it didn't feel like that long ago. We were watching him put on those classics at WrestleMania, and that quickly changed into what we see here now. Unfortunately, because some wrestlers just don't know when to quit, and unfortunately, it should have been prior to this. I'll still argue it should have been the Brock match. That should have been his last match. But if that wasn't it, this should have been it. You know, he left the stuff in the ring, which always signifies something. But unfortunately, the moment was cool if you were probably there live, you know, getting to see a John Cena proposal into WrestleMania, and then seeing Undertaker retire. You know, that would have been cool at the moment. But unfortunately, it lasts, I think, just over a year before he's back at WrestleMania next year. So, in the grand scheme of things, it means very little now. But yeah, definitely. Uh, the match did not hold my attention at all. Um, Yeah, it's unfortunate, but the consolation prize being here that you got to see the Undertaker leave his gear in the ring for what we thought at the time was some sort of retirement. So, um, yeah, rating for me 4.5 out of 10. Uh, yeah, a rough way to end lots of matches that could have been better, but unfortunately weren't. KP, let's wrap this one up for the sake of everyone. WrestleMania 33. Give us your high points and your low points, and yeah, we'll get this one wrapped up.
So as you all can tell, we really enjoyed this one. What a stelling WrestleMania, right? there was some low points here throughout this show, and yeah, there were a couple of higher points. You know, I looked towards Shane McMahon and AJ Styles, looked towards Kevin Owens and Chris Jericho, and then the tag team ladder match as well. The first half of the show really sort of carried the whole thing, in my opinion. Second half just sort of like put me to sleep, and was a big struggle to work through. But obviously, we got some big differences, Nick and myself here, with obviously, ratings differing a little bit here and there, especially mostly with Triple H and Seth Rollins. But yeah, I think there are some things to take from this WrestleMania, and that is, maybe 10 matches is too many on one night. And just, the women being rushed in their contest, not great. And yeah, the main event putting people to sleep is not what you want from a WrestleMania. So yeah, it's got some talking points for sure, but kudos to those matches I did mention that were on the upper echelon of this WrestleMania because they stood out like a sore thumb, and that's a good thing in this sense because at least they were good. Imagine if those early stages hadn't been great, this WrestleMania would have been down in the depths of this whole project. My average rating overall of all the matches put together comes as a 6.5. That sounds quite high. It's sort of in the middle area of this sort of WrestleMania project for myself in terms of my ratings. So yeah, I think that's essentially fair because it wasn't the worst WrestleMania we've seen, but it was by no means anywhere near the best that we've seen. So yeah, I think just sit in the middle. That's absolutely fine by me. Nick, your overall thoughts, your final thoughts on WrestleMania 33. Let's hear what you got to say.
All right. Well, as far as highs go, I think I mentioned that earlier. Triple H and Seth Rollins actually my favorite match of the night. Um, the John Cena bit was fun. Ladder match was obviously good as well. Jericho, Owens, and Shane and AJ. That's kind of where the positive ends. I won't run through all the negatives again because unfortunately there are a lot of them. But the main event obviously being very lackluster, and the Randy Orton Bray Wyatt I felt like could have been something special. Unfortunately, it did not quite live up to the challenge, and the women obviously deserving better for what they have transpired and turned that women's revolution into. Unfortunately, they did not. They got the short end of the stick on this particular WrestleMania. So overall, coming in at 5.7 for me. So we'll, I guess, round that up to a 6. That feels pretty generous comparatively speaking as well, just because I feel like more matches were not good than were good. So make of that what you will. I will say it didn't have anything that felt like I can't believe that's on the WrestleMania like some prior manias do. So at least that's going for it. But I felt like on paper this should have been should have been a better WrestleMania. Unfortunately, a lot of matches here just didn't get enough time and or got too much time. So make of that what you will as well. WrestleMania 33, we will quickly leave this one in the dust, and we will work on WrestleMania 34 here over the next week. But enough from us here at the push. What did you all make of this WrestleMania? Did you dislike it as much as we did, or did you make better of it? Let us know in the comments below. We'd love to hear from you. Also, don't forget to hit that like and subscribe button as well, as that does kind of help us out. But in the meantime, we'll be back shortly, continuing this WrestleMania project as well as our weekly recaps. And until next time, this has been The Push with Nick and KP. We'll see you soon. Take care.